Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Before the sea learned to armor itself in storms, there was a shore where olive trees lowered their branches as if listening. Here the air smelled of salt and laurel, and the marble temples were young enough to believe in mercy. Medusa walked that shoreline with hair like quiet vines and eyes that did not demand to be seen. She was a priestess then, guardian of a goddess who asked for stillness, not sacrifice. At dawn she polished the temple's bronze, its face a wavering mirror, and practiced the ancient ritual of unlooking. To serve a goddess is to see without consuming, to witness without taking. So Medusa learned to carry her gaze like water cupped in two hands. Steady, careful, unspilling. The island remembered her footsteps. Fishermen, returning before the sun chose a color, spoke of a girl whose presence cooled the nets. Mothers at the well paused their gossip when she passed, as if the day itself were attempting good behavior. Even the sea moderated its voice. Beauty, when it refuses to perform, changes the world by teaching it how to listen. But rumors travel on wind that belongs to no one. Sailors spoke elsewhere of the clear-eyed priestess, and elsewhere still the story grew thorns. Names ride on echoes until they no longer fit the faces that earned them. A name like Medusa, soft at first, then sibilant, was destined to be mispronounced by history. In the temple's innermost court, a spring rose from rock with the patience of the moon. Medusa tended it as if it were a child who had learned to glow. She braided her hair not for the mirror, but to keep it from brushing the holy surface. Her vow was simple: keep the water clear, keep the goddess house untouched by pride. Priestesses came and went, each with a private gravity. Medusa alone stood like a pause between two waves.
The elder acolyte, Thalia, said she had the stillness of beginnings, the kind of quiet that makes gods lean closer. One evening a stranger arrived, veiled against the dust of a long road. He asked for water, then for the story of the spring. Medusa poured from the sacred bowl without letting the mirror of the surface break. The stranger drank, and in the drinking studied the way she did not seek his eyes. "What do you see when you look at the world?" he asked. Medusa considered the question like a stone she was not sure she should lift. "I see where the light is kind," she said at last, "and where it needs teaching." The stranger smiled. Some smiles are doors. This one was a key. Nights thickened with rumors. Furtive sandals on temple steps. Laughter caught too quickly. A name, Poseidon, spoken as if it were a tide able to open any harbor. He came without ceremony. Salt in his beard, conquest in his stance, the restless weather of a god who mistook want for law. He praised the curve of the columns, the discipline of the rites, and last of all the priestess who had learned to be beautiful without inviting hunger. Praise is a kind of net. Even when it fails to catch, it remembers the shape of what it wanted. "Look at me," he said. "I serve a goddess who forbids that," she answered. "Then let the goddess look at me through you," he said, and the storm in his voice mistook metaphor for permission. To refuse a god is to teach him the word boundary. Some gods are poor students. Medusa barred the inner court, set her body between the spring and the thunder of his desire. "Water is a mirror," she said, breath steady. "If you break it, it remembers." The sea rose in his eyes. The temple shuddered as if remembering earthquakes. Olive leaves turned their palms to the sky, asking for a different weather. But the night did not end in thunder. It ended in absence. He left with the insult of a promised return.
Dawn discovered her where she had been all night, kneeling by the spring, mending its surface with patience. Thalia found her and pressed warm bread into her hands. "Did you cry?" the elder asked. "No," said Medusa. "I counted." "Counted what?" "How many times the water forgave us for touching it." The island held its breath. Even fishermen knew that when a god is refused, he consults his sister. And the sister in this story was a patron of the very stillness Medusa kept. Athena arrives in a silence that can lift a war from a man's hands. She came like clean thought. Owl light gathered on the temple lintel, and the air took on the iron fragrance of rain that decides not to fall. Medusa lowered her eyes and felt the goddess regard like a weight that chooses to be gentle. "You protected the spring," Athena said. Not a question, a notation. Medusa's throat tightened. "I protected your face in it." For the mirror remembered the goddess too, and gods prefer their reflections unbroken. Athena's gaze moved like a blade sheathed in law. "Rumor is a serpent," she said. "When sailors speak, their tongues grow scales. What happened here will not be what the world repeats." Medusa lifted the bronze mirror and turned it so the goddess could see herself reflected in a reflection. "To serve you," she said, "is to learn which truths can survive being carried by a rumor." Athena did not smile. Gods rarely reward the courage they require. But she did something rarer. She asked a mortal what she wanted. "Tell me," said the goddess, "what form of safety you would accept." Medusa looked at her hands, the human map of labor, prayer, and the memory of refused touch. "I want a world where a woman's no is honored the first time." Athena closed her eyes as if the request were a distant citadel she might take in a century.
"I can give you armor," she said. "Give me language," Medusa whispered. "There are answers even gods cannot give cleanly." Athena is wisdom, but she is also the politics of temples, the long bureaucracy of myth. She turned to the spring and spoke to the water in a dialect only reflections understand. "If the sea claims this house," she said, "let the mirror claim him back. Let any gaze that arrives without permission meet its own weight." The water darkened, then brightened, like a verdict. Medusa watched and did not yet understand the cost of a blessing that doubles as a weapon. Gifts from gods are always halves of something. Mercy and law, protection and price. The island changed first. Men approaching the temple found their own eyes heavy in their heads, as if asked to carry what they demanded others carry. Boasts dried in throats. Laughter reconsidered itself. The bronze mirror showed less of faces now, more of intentions. Medusa kept the rites. She braided her quiet hair. She taught the younger girls how to pour without ripples. And she waited for the sea to come back wearing a different mood. At twilight, footsteps on stone. The tide's rehearsal. Poseidon's shadow crossed the threshold like a spear deciding what it wishes to be. He came not to learn, but to claim. Medusa lifted the mirror between them, an ordinary object made severe by context. "Look," she said, "not at me, but at yourself." For a heartbeat he obeyed. All weather knows a moment when it considers becoming rain instead of war. The surface did not flatter him. No mirror does kindness to entitlement. He saw not a god, but a wanting that had mistaken itself for right. The temple held its breath. Olive leaves trembled. Athena's owl turned its head once, as if writing down a future. And in that hinge of silence, when a story could still choose several endings, the mirror began to change.
The night was thin as a blade. Wind circled the temple like a sentence being rewritten by the gods themselves. Medusa stood before the spring, her reflection wavering with each heartbeat. The mirror no longer showed her clearly. Instead, it shimmered between faces, her own, Poseidon's, Athena's, each flickering like a truth unsure of itself. The water had become the language of judgment. She whispered to it, "Tell me what I am." But the surface did not answer. It only watched her back. When the sea rose again, it did not roar. It came in silence, climbing the temple steps like something ashamed of its power. The air turned cold. Olive leaves rattled like coins dropped in prayer. Poseidon entered without a sound. He looked less like a god and more like hunger given shape. He spoke softly. "Your silence has been mistaken for defiance." Medusa did not move. "Then let it be defiance," she said. The storm that followed had no thunder. It moved through the body, not the sky, a violence made of proximity, of divinity forgetting restraint. When it ended, the temple stood unbroken but altered. The sacred spring was no longer clear. It shimmered with a dark sheen, not filth but consequence. Medusa sat beside it, unmoving. The mirror had seen too much, and in that reflection, something new began to breathe, slow, venomous, patient. Athena came again at dawn. The goddess shadow stretched across the marble like a verdict arriving before the trial. "Your temple is stained," she said. Medusa did not look up. "By whom?" Athena's silence was its own answer. Gods do not name their brothers when the world is listening. Instead, she raised her hand, and light flared, the kind that does not illuminate but erases.
"You broke your vow of purity," Athena said. "I was made to break it," Medusa whispered. "Then be remade." The mirror cracked, not by force but by meaning. Every reflection it had ever held spilled outward. The sea, the sky, every prayer ever whispered in the temple. The water rose into the air, shaping itself into scales. Each droplet hardened into emerald and gold, weaving through her hair like serpents learning how to dream. Medusa gasped. Her reflection twisted, split, multiplied. The woman she had been folded inward, replaced by something that remembered both prayer and punishment. Her skin shimmered like the inside of shells. Her eyes no longer reflected, they returned. Athena watched, unblinking. Her expression was the stillness of law, not cruelty. "Now," she said, "you will guard this temple forever. No man shall look upon you without meeting the weight of what he carries." Medusa's voice came like wind through teeth. "Then let them see themselves, clearly, and for the last time." The goddess turned away, leaving her in silence that no longer listened, only waited. The island grew quiet. Fishermen stopped coming to shore. Sailors whispered of statues found along the cliffs, figures frozen mid-step, eyes wide as if they had just remembered their guilt. Children were told not to say her name, yet even in fear they said it softly. Medusa, the word curling through the air like a serpent trying to remember it once was a woman. In the temple's heart, the spring no longer reflected. It absorbed. The water's surface turned to shadow, swallowing moonlight whole. And from that darkness, eyes opened dozens, hundreds, each a memory of every man who had come too close. The curse was not vengeance. It was revelation.
For to look upon her was to see oneself stripped of excuse, and no man forgives his own reflection. Athena, from Olympus, watched the silence spreading like twilight. The other gods said nothing. Guilt has poor vocabulary. The sea kept its distance. Poseidon's waves never touched that shore again. Medusa stood where the horizon kissed the temple, and for the first time, she did not hide from her reflection. In her eyes, Serpent slept, not in hatred, but in knowing. The sun never rose on that island again. Instead, light lingered, pale, distant, like the ghost of dawn that refused to arrive. The sea surrounded the cliffs in endless circles, whispering the same word over and over. Remember. Medusa walked among the statues. They stood as they had fallen, sailors, soldiers, wanderers, each face frozen at the threshold of revelation. None in agony, none in peace, just awareness captured too late. She did not hate them. She pitied them, for they had only seen what they feared to be. In the evenings, she would sit beside the temple's spring, her serpents quiet, their scales reflecting stars that no longer spoke to her. The water remained black, but beneath it, faint shapes moved, like memories still trying to breathe. Sometimes she saw herself there, not the monster but the girl she once was. Other times the reflection was Athena's, or Poseidon's, or something in between, as if divinity and humanity were just two halves of the same wound. A ship approached one morning, sails white as regret. It did not know the island's name. Men stepped ashore with laughter that did not belong to this world. They called it adventure. The sea called it offering. Medusa watched from the cliffs. Her eyes were veiled, her hair still as dusk. She whispered, "Turn back. The gods do not watch this place. Only memory does. But memory does not speak loud enough for men."
They reached the temple by noon. The statues greeted them, a silent army of those who had once thought themselves brave. Still, the men did not stop. Curiosity has always been another word for doom. The first to see her froze mid-breath. His sword fell before he did. The others turned. But in that instant between fear and movement, they too became echoes carved from flesh. When the wind passed, the temple was silent again, a garden of stone, tended by time itself. At night, she walked among them, her fingers brushing the marble cheeks, her voice a whisper. "I did not ask for worship." The serpent stirred, not in anger but in sorrow. Each scale hummed faintly, not hiss, but hymn. For in their language, grief and song are the same word. Far away on Olympus, Athena heard the whispers. Mortals called Medusa a monster. Poets called her a mirror. Both were right. The goddess closed her eyes. For every curse is a confession. Poseidon avoided her name. The sea, once proud, now lapped gently at the island's edges as if afraid to wake its ghosts. Years passed. The island changed. Vines grew over statues. Flowers bloomed from cracks in the marble. The temple crumbled until only the spring remained, dark, endless, still whispering its single word. Remember. Medusa no longer wept. Even sorrow had turned to stone within her. She sat by the water's edge, the stars above her cold and sharp. For every serpent that coiled upon her crown, another memory fell asleep beneath the sea. But deep below something moved, a current that did not belong to the sea. It was not Poseidon's power nor Athena's will. It was the slow awakening of stories themselves, stirring at the thought of being forgotten.
And in that unseen motion, Medusa's eyes glowed, not in rage, but in remembrance of what it meant to see truth, even when truth turns everything to stone. On that island, time stopped counting. Seasons did not end. They waited. And those who came after, explorers, dreamers, prophets, found the statues and felt watched, as if the air itself were remembering them too soon. In the heart of the ruins, beneath the black spring, her reflection still waited. The girl, the goddess, the serpent, each watching the other in eternal stillness. There was no difference between night and day anymore. The island breathed in a circle, stone inhaling time, sea exhaling silence. Medusa slept where the spring once whispered, her body half in shadow, half in light, like the edge of a thought trying to wake itself. In sleep, She did not see Athena or Poseidon. She saw only a garden of mirrors that refused to reflect. Each mirror breathed. Each one had eyes. A serpent lifted its head from her hair and spoke, not in words, but in a low hum that moved through her bones. "You were once the face of prayer," it whispered. "Now you are the pause between every word." Medusa reached toward it. Its scales were cold, yet alive, like memory carved in breath. She asked, "Am I awake?" "You are what awakens," the serpent said. The dream shifted like water in a broken bowl. Statues moved without moving, stone faces tilting toward her, eyes cracking open with faint light. One by one they began to sing, a sound like sand sliding through glass. Their song was not of sorrow, but of continuance. "We do not die when we are seen," they sang. "We live forever in your gaze." Medusa wept, but her tears turned to crystal as they fell. They did not shatter, they rang. She found herself standing before the temple again, but this time the marble was alive. Veins of light ran through it like pulse. The columns spoke in voices of old stone. "Do you wish to wake?"
"Do you wish to wake?" "I do," she said. "But the world would turn to ash if I opened my eyes." "Then dream for them," the temple answered. "Dream until the world learns to see without destroying." The sea rose in her sleep, but this time it did not rage. It carried voices from distant shores. Men praying to Athena, to Poseidon, to anyone who would forgive them for what they had done. None of those prayers reached the sky. They drifted instead into her dream. Each prayer became a stone, and each stone became part of her island. Thus was born a new kind of memory, one that could not be washed away. Somewhere in the distance, a child spoke her name for the first time in centuries. The sound reached the island like a ray of sun through deep water. Medusa's eyes opened in the dream. The serpents lifted their heads toward the sky. For a moment, she felt the weight of forgiveness, not from the gods, but from the earth itself. And in that moment, the island breathed. The stones softened. The sea glowed green like emerald light beneath the waves. When she awoke, the world was unchanged, and yet everything was different. The serpents slept peacefully. Her reflection in the spring did not frighten her anymore, because for the first time since the curse, Medusa had dreamed, and the dream had not been of vengeance, but of understanding.
Centuries passed like ripples on a sea without wind. The island no longer belonged to the world, it belonged to time itself. Moss grew on the statues, ivy climbed the marble, and the whisper of the spring turned into a heartbeat. Beneath its surface, something glowed faintly. Not fire, not reflection, but memory, the light of things that refused to die properly. Medusa stood at the edge of the spring, the serpents upon her crown swaying like windless reeds. Her gaze no longer cursed, it revealed. A bird landed near her feet. It did not turn to stone. Instead, its feathers shimmered with faint green light, as if it had seen her truth and survived it. She watched it take flight. For the first time, the air carried no fear, only awe. In the depths below, where broken statues slept, their faces began to soften. The cracks filled with silver veins, veins of remembrance. Each statue whispered in silence, "We are not gone. We are what she has seen." And the island trembled, not from wrath but renewal. Even stone, it seemed, could remember how to dream. On Olympus, Athena felt the shift. The curse she had forged was changing shape. It was no longer punishment, it was prophecy. She turned her eyes toward the horizon where the island lay hidden beneath mist. For a moment even she felt small. Perhaps, she said softly to herself, truth cannot be silenced, only transformed. Poseidon said nothing. The sea beneath him carried no reflection. One night, the stars moved closer to the earth. Their light bent toward the island, touching the spring like fingertips against glass. The serpents lifted their heads, shimmering with celestial light. Medusa closed her eyes, and the light entered her, quietly, like understanding. The stone around her glowed. Every frozen figure began to breathe again, not in flesh, but in remembrance. They did not awaken to live, they awakened to be known.
The island itself began to hum. It was not sound, but resonance, a vibration older than language. The sea turned gold under the moon. Waves curled inward, as if bowing. And in that sacred stillness, the light that once belonged to the heavens, now lived inside the heart of a cursed woman. The gods had taken everything from her, and she had turned it into eternity. When dawn came, it did not rise, it bloomed. Every stone shone from within. The island became a mirror again, but this time it reflected not the face of the gods, but the soul of what they had forgotten to love. And in that reflection, Medusa smiled, not as a monster, but as a memory that refused to fade. The island no longer slept. It watched. Every stone, every ripple, every breath of wind moved with quiet awareness, as though the land itself had become an eye open and eternal. Medusa stood at its heart, her reflection glowing faintly in the spring. Her serpents no longer hissed. They swayed softly, like lullabies sung to eternity. The sea was calm, the sky too still to be real. Athena appeared once more, her armor dimmed, her face shadowed by centuries of silence. "Your curse is complete," she said. Medusa turned to her, not in anger, but in calm understanding. "Was it ever mine?" Athena hesitated. The weight of divinity pressed down like thunder too tired to strike. "You were meant to be warning," she whispered. "Instead, you became truth." The air trembled. Above them, the stars began to dim, not by darkness, but by reverence. Even constellations seemed to bow. Medusa's eyes reflected not the heavens, but everything beneath them, oceans, temples, hearts. Every gaze that had ever judged her now lived within her, turned inward like memory learning to forgive itself. The goddess stepped forward. "Medusa," she said, "the world is afraid of what it cannot forget. Would you have me undo this?" Medusa smiled faintly. "Would you have the world blind again?"
For the first time in her long existence, Athena looked away. The reflection of the goddess flickered in the spring, then vanished. The earth began to pulse with a sound older than life. It was not thunder, nor the sea, nor the serpent's breath. It was the hum of understanding, rising from stone, from silence, from sorrow. The statues across the island glowed from within. Their eyes shimmered, not in fear, but in memory. Each one whispered a single word into the wind. "See!" The wind carried it beyond the island, across the sea, through temples, cities, dreams. Mortals woke in the night, unsure why their hearts felt heavier, as though someone had finally remembered them completely. Medusa looked to the horizon. The sea mirrored her perfectly, calm, infinite, awake. She could no longer tell where reflection ended and world began. The serpents lifted their heads, their scales catching the final starlight. Together they formed a circle around her, a living crown not of punishment, but of protection. She closed her eyes. The world did not vanish. It opened. For the first time since the beginning, the gods looked down and saw nothing to fear. For the first time they saw themselves, and it humbled them. Athena lowered her spear. Poseidon bowed his head. Even the sky blinked, and the stars rearranged themselves into the shape of an eye, closed, resting, eternal. The island faded from the mortal map. No ship could find it, no prayer could reach it. But in dreams, some still hear the whisper of the spring, the slow breathing of stone remembering light. And sometimes, when the world grows too proud, a mirror cracks for no reason at all, as if somewhere, a serpent opens its eyes again, just long enough to remind the sky who truly sees. End of The Eye of the Serpent, The Birth of Medusa.